Thanks for tuning in. You are watching Notepad. I'm your host Ibrahim Sani. Again and again, this conversation in this show keeps on talking about halal, halal processes and halal industries. One of the areas that we keep on asking whether or not the industry is going to be halal or not is of course the F&B. Within the F&B sector, there's a lot of companies that are pushing forward halal agenda. One of them is of course Halal. Fonterra Brands pushing towards a halal journey. So joining me is Megawati Suzari. She is of course the Director of New Product Development, Scientific and Regulatory Affairs at Fonterra Brands Malaysia's Berhad. Mega, thanks for taking the time to speak with us. Let's talk about Fonterra Brands and how your work is in line with that company that you work for.
Okay, hi. Thank you, Ibrahim, for having me here today. Fonterra Brands Malaysia is actually part of Fonterra, headquarters in New Zealand. We are a dairy nutrition company. We are dairy cooperative owned by 10,000 farmers. So Fonterra is actually embracing this halal and toiban concept. So just not about halal, but we're also producing product which is halal, safe and also nutritious as a wholesome to the consumer in Malaysia. So today, Fonterra is actually exporting to about more than 140 countries from New Zealand, but from Malaysia itself, we actually have our manufacturing plant here, 2 manufacturing plants, and we're actually exporting to more than 13 countries around the region. So I'm taking care of the products development, so right from the very beginnings of the process, from the concepts to the commercialization, halal aspect has been included right from the very beginning. So if you're talking about milk, it's actually already in halal ingredients. But of course, when we talk about the milk for nutritional dairy products, when we actually develop a products, we want to make sure that the nutrition is actually right for the target populations according to the science and new sciences, and also comply to the internationals and also local regulation, as well as wholesome and delicious. And when we actually, right from the very beginning, even from my lab, you know, when we actually prepare the lab samples to the commercialization, every ingredient must be halal and must be safe and must be nutritious. And this is actually how we are working through with our authority in New Zealand. We are working with New Zealand Islamic Development Trust and also Federation of Islamic Association of New Zealand. And these are the Islamic certifying body that certify all our product in New Zealand.
Some of the brands that is within this company include household names, yeah, Anlene, Anmum, Fern Leaf, Calcium. Banyak ni anak I pun minum calcium. The conversation is never about whether or not it's halal or otherwise. It's always about whether or not it's sugary or not. How do you manage nutrition with halal, particularly when we have issues regarding COVID-19, comorbidity and non-communicable diseases like diabetes? How do you make sure that your products are not just halal and nutritious, but doesn't have sugar in it?
Right. I think you're spot on, Ibrahim, because we are actually a company that is a director for the new products development. So our principle is actually on the responsible innovation. So when we look at this, we talk about the no added sugar and also reduced sugar. So this is actually what we have been doing since more than 10 years ago. We actually have launched our product Mom Essential with no added sugar, and now we also have even look at the other nutrients that can enhance the 8 aspect of the development of the children. So now we also have our products, New Innovation and Mom Essential Gold. So if you were to look at how we manage this, we look at both the nutrition side of it, and as I mentioned earlier, we actually look at the science and also new sciences. Of course, new issues in Malaysia, well, maybe not so new, is about the non-communicable diseases, and Malaysia is actually one of the country with the highest levels of obesity rate. So what is actually that we are doing? We are actually supporting the government initiative, for example, in terms of keep on looking at where we can reduce sugar, the fat and all that. So our product is actually, most of them is also supporting the healthier choice logo. In this way, for example, you mentioned that your kid is actually taking the calcium cultured milk drink, and that is actually having the lower sugar levels in the category. So that is actually our commitment to make sure that while they are actually lower in sugar, but of course with science, we can actually still deliver a very good product from sensory perspective. So the children, they will not notice, that the sugar, that the product do not have much sugar, but because actually you deliver in a very nice taste. So that's how actually we tackle for the children. At the same time, for the adults who maybe know more about who really wanted to know about the product. For example, our end goal is actually no added sugar, but we don't actually really shout about it because we actually shouting more on the health proposition. But if you actually look at the profile of the product and on the nutrition information panels, we don't actually have any added sugar into it. So the sugar that comes is actually naturally coming from
So we touched two big ideas here. Number one, the nutritional value as well as the health element of it. One of them is of course zero sugar or less sugar. Another one is halal toiban. What does the components of your process make it halal toiban? Is being less sugar one of them?
Okay, I think when we look into halal and toiban, one is actually about halal and two is about the toyib. And toyib is actually the part about wholesomeness, and this is actually where it goes back to the nutrition part of it, goes back to the food safety of it.
So does it include measuring sugar levels when trying to go for halal and toiban?
It's actually one of the nutrition criteria whereby sugar is actually one of the big group under carbohydrate, and therefore we actually
simplest carbohydrate to be frank.
Yes. So here I think what we're actually talking is about the added sugar. So we don't talk about the natural sugar because added sugar is something that you can control, and this is actually where the company is also have been having this for quite some times, whereby we will limit the addition of added sugar into the formulation. So I think not just into our MM Essential, but it's also on our N-Lean and also across, for example, in terms of all our yogurt. That's why it carries the Healthier Choice logo, because that is actually showing we actually have met what's the recommendation from the government.
Fonterra Brands, from a macro perspective, why are you guys pursuing this path of getting more information out in terms of halal toiban? Why not just get the minimum requirement standard by JAKIM and beyond with your day?
I think it's about halal toiban is actually this is the concept that we are giving because we believe that halal is just not about that one particular ingredient, but it's actually across the entire supply chain. So today, let's say if you're talking about products that we have coming all the way from New Zealand to Malaysia, or from the Malaysia that we produce to our consumer, we also make sure, for example, our distributor, our retailer, our warehouse is also aware about the halal requirement. In fact, we have our food safety people and also our halal compliance manager that will go and visit this warehouse and also go and visit the distributor, and also part of our contract with our transporter that we include that they must take care of these products, our products, that it should not be mixed with any other non-halal product, nor is actually needs to be transported together with a non-halal product. And when it's actually been kept in the warehouse, for example, it needs to be according to the right requirement for halal as well as food safety. So that is actually why for us, one is a halal, another one is actually about the nutrition part of it, the wholesomeness of it, and another one is actually about the food safety part of it. So that is actually for us is what we would like to give to the consumer and also part of our commitment. Yeah. So this is what we promised to the Malaysian, and this is also what we are doing. But at the same time, we felt that halal is just not for Muslim, it's also for non-Muslim with this concept of halalan and toiban. And in fact today in our factory, because we are manufacturing hub for Fonterra in this region, all our products that produce in here, market in Malaysia and also market beyond Malaysia are all halal. although some of the country may not require halal logo to be on their pack, but actually all the product produced from Malaysia are all halal.
Okay, we'll take a short break before we continue our conversation with Fonterra Brands. Don't go anywhere. Thanks for staying on with us. We have with us in the studio Fonterra Brands. Mega, we want to talk a little bit more about the role of Malaysia and how it plays in terms of being a centre of excellence for not just Fonterra Brands in Malaysia, but of course around the world, if not the region. Let's talk a little bit more about how Fonterra Brands in Malaysia is trying to, in a way, export the business processes, not so much the business itself, but the business processes, how you guys do the operations back end with your colleagues around the world.
Right. I think Malaysia being the leader in halal, that is actually good for us because today, if we were to look in Malaysia, we have the right ecosystem on halal.
Okay, Chop, how do you know we are the best in the world? What is the measurement there?
For halal?
Yeah, for halal.
I think right now, if you were to look at from halal perspective, we do have the right ecosystem from the standard, from the policies and all that. I don't think that any other country, at least from the one that we actually been dealing with, they do have. For example, the Malaysian standard is still something that we actually share and export out.
Let's talk about how you are processing, you're exporting the business processes in Malaysia and being a centre of excellence. Do you use that word, centre of excellence?
Not really. I think we, at least for us, we use our product as centre of innovation for the region.
Okay, centre of innovation. So how do you do that? Do you use Malaysia as a launch pad for other places in the world?
Yeah, in fact, actually Malaysia always has been the launch pad for many new products within the region. For example, if I'm taking the about the Enlin Goals, that is actually the new formulation that is actually where the recipe has been clinically tested to provide and give positive health benefit from the bone, joints and muscles health proposition. So when we talk about that, when we develop the products, when we actually choose any of the ingredient, it needs to be halal. And when we actually export out the product, it's also halal. But when we also wanted to share with all the other colleagues, we will also provide them all these halal ingredient as a reference for them.
Do you have case examples where some markets worked in this process?
For examples, let's say in Sri Lanka. Yeah, Sri Lanka is actually not within this region, but Malaysia always becomes the center of reference when it comes to the milk powder formulation. Yeah, so this is actually where we will export out our expertise to them. We will do the peer review of the formula. At the same time, we will come up with the products, for examples for Ethiopia, where the product not necessarily produced out of Malaysia, but it's actually produced in our factory in Danum. So we actually export out the formula and we provide to them all the materials, and all that material is actually where we have chosen, and it's all halal. Yeah. So I think in Malaysia, because of the right ecosystem that we have, we also be able to share the Malaysian standard when it comes to the logistic, when it comes to the supply chain, when it comes to the halal itself, because we actually do have Malaysian halal standard for the manufacturings of the products for food and beverages. And this is actually why with this we can share with our colleagues, whether in New Zealand or whether in Philippines or whether in Vietnam or whether in Thailand and Indonesia. Of course, Indonesia have their own, but I think it's still no issue of sharing the standards that we have here. So they also understand what is actually the requirement of halal in Malaysia.
Being in the fast-moving consumer industry, you tend to do a lot, not you per se, but Fonterra Brands would tend to do a lot of market research and market study, on top of the fact that you want to look at consumer preferences. How do you tell if the consumer wants more halal-oriented products rather than, say, nutritional products?
I think that is actually part of the new products development process, where we will need to have the consumer insight, and also we do a lot of focus group, And Malaysia being a majority is a Muslim population, so this is actually where, in the focus group, sometimes when we introduce any new ingredients, they will be asking us, will that going to be halal? So that's why that is actually the insights that we have, that people, no matter how actually that you're trying to provide to them the highest nutrition, introducing new ingredient, they will always ask, will that be halal? And that is actually indicated, provide us the insight that no matter what we do, definitely it needs to be halal. And that's also aligned with our commitment. Every product that we produce out of Malaysia, and also if we import to be sold in Malaysia, it needs to be halal compliance.
Okay, we understand your agenda, but we need to understand the consumer preferences. So based on your answer, focus groups express intent on the products being halal. That request, is it a lot more, say for instance, than asking for other elements like more tastier products, more nutritional products? I don't know how to see or measure the want from the market.
I think when we actually have focus group, we don't just look at halal. That's for sure. We actually look at many elements, and that is actually one of the components. So the way how we see it is actually people are very concerned about the non-communicable diseases, and they want to actually have product that can help them to become healthier. Or they can, then they understand, oh, actually in the market out there, there are actually products where they can actually make a choice to buy when they know that it's actually helping them in their health. So I think when in that answering your questions, whether how much of them, we won't be able to say, oh yeah, they want more halal or they want more nutritious. But the way how I see is actually coming together, especially for the Muslim and also for the Malays. Of course, the Chinese, the concern is actually more for the nutrition part of it, the healthy part of it. But when it comes to the Muslim, that is actually starts to coming out in our research.
We'll go for a short break. When we come back, we'll discuss a little bit more with Fonterra Brands on their halal journey. Don't go anywhere. Thanks for staying on. This is Notepad. I'm your host, Ibrahim Sani. I'm with Mega of Fonterra Brands. Let's talk a little bit more about business process operations, business process engineering, rethinking how you guys process everything from sourcing through all your corporates, cooperatives in New Zealand, all the farmers out there, sourcing the milk all the way to getting that calcium in my hand from that store that I just bought this morning for my kids. That whole process. To change something, the operations of it requires a lot of investment from the company. And those kind of investments can be justified if it is sensible, the argument. But the question now is, will it be justified if you suggest to your colleagues at Fonterra Brands that perhaps we should re-engineer how we process things, re-engineer how we sell things, and even re-engineer how we market things, right? Do you think that that justification is there for your colleagues, internal stakeholders, to rethink how they do things in order for us to achieve that halal Thayyiban agenda that you guys are pushing forward?
I think halal and Thayyiban has always been the agenda for Fonterra, especially Fonterra Brands Malaysia, because this is actually where we know that the consumers, more than 60% is actually Muslim. So here what we are saying is that in terms of re-engineering, in our communication, perhaps in our communication, because the whole process that we have, right from New Zealand to Malaysia, in terms of the halal compliance, that is actually, the awareness is very high. In fact, everybody who actually work with Fonterra needs to understand about our halal commitment and also the needs to comply to the halal requirement. But when it comes to the communication, maybe perhaps, this is some things that we are also looking at how we can even asking our marketing to ensure that the halal communication to make it even bigger. But I think at the end of the day, we also need to balance between the halal and also the nutrition part of it, because that is actually the key propositions that we have together with halal. for example, every brands that we have here, we want to make sure that the people knows about the nutrients that we are actually delivering and also the health benefit, and at the same time we knows that it's halal, and that halal we actually today we have done through communication of our label, and also in our TVC we try to actually include the halal logo in our communication, so that provide confidence to the consumer that they know our product are halal.
Growing up, I'm stuck with TV3, TV1 and TV2. I see a lot of TVC and I still remember them actually, Fern Leaf and
Ibu-ibu.
yeah, all that, right? So it's like, and then when probiotics became a thing, people were bombarded by the virtues of having probiotic yogurt. I don't want to mention some of the brands which are competitors, but suffice to say that awareness of probiotics and having the need for me to consume a little bit more of beverages containing probiotics is there. I don't see a label of probiotic and then nobody explained it to me. I don't see a label of calcium. People actually literally explain it to me in that TVC. Do you think that putting or slapping down a label of halal is enough? Perhaps. For the time being, but do you think that we should do a lot more in terms of educating the market in terms of what halal means? It's not just not having pork, but it's the whole business process behind it.
Yeah, I think that is part of our corporate social responsibility, where we actually have worked with many different agencies, and this is actually where we brings that halal out as well to inform to them about the halalan toiban across the entire supply chain. At the same time, we actually not just working in silo, meaning that we are also working with our Federation Malaysian manufacturers, as well as we provide our dairy technology experts to the Ministry of Health when it comes to all the technicals issue, so that they understand even it's actually our probiotics is actually produced according to the halal Sharia compliance. In fact, for us, our probiotics DR10 is actually produced by our own Fonterras, so it also follow the halal requirement, and that is also has been certified halal by the New Zealand Islamic Development Trust, which is the Islamic certifying body that is actually recognized by JAKIM. So to us, it's actually educating consumer about halal going to be a continuous journey, because the new person will be coming in, you know, so this is actually where we need to keep on telling them about the halal that we actually have in all our product. But at the same time, because this is also our commitment to Malaysian consumer, we must make sure that they understand our product halal. The first part definitely through the label, and the others is actually through all the above the line communications that we have.
So let's talk about ATL communications also with some of your competitors. Do you think it's time that you guys get together, you and your competitors, talk about halal collectively, so that the market understands that this is more than just a product push?
Yeah, I think being Malaysia having that right ecosystem, as I said, this is where under FMM, what we call Federation of Malaysian Manufacturer, we do actually have a halal group that is actually together looking at the agenda, how people will understand that Malaysia is actually one of the main producer of halal product. But I must say, go back to the halal issue, because halal in Malaysia is actually not mandatory, it's a voluntary. But Fonterra actually have make it compulsory that all the product that we sell in Malaysia, whether it's actually produced out of Malaysia or whether it's actually fully imported, need to comply with halal. So to make sure that, you know, as an industry, although this is actually voluntary, but a lot more, this is actually our roles as an industry member to ensure that more and more of the industry is actually follow the halal and also getting the halal certification from JAKIM. If they are actually producing in Malaysia, we really encourage them to also work with JAKIM and this is just not for us, but also to me as a Muslim as well as a Malaysian, we can ensure that the multinational company, the small medium enterprise company, they also have a product which has been certified halal, because then it can help more Malaysians to actually have choices of the products.
Fantastic. That was my conversation with Megawati Suzari, the Director of New Product Development and Scientific and Regulatory Affairs at Fonterra Brands. If you missed any part of this interview, just head on to astroawani.com. Look for Notepad over there. Plenty of interviews like this can be found there. You can also watch these kind of interviews on your mobile devices. Just download the Astro AWANI app wherever you get the application. Until then, thanks very much for watching. Until next time.